Hello and welcome to the Inside Stylist podcast, where we talk all about interiors with interviews with interior stylists, writers and the big names in interiors, from brands and PRs to artists and designers. I also catch up with industry experts in the know and get them to share all their knowledge and advice. There's so much to talk about. I'm your host, Emma Morton-Turner, an interior stylist and a writer with a ton of experience. I set up InsideStylist.com so I could share all that interiors love with you. So don't forget to head on over to the website for not only the show notes from today's episode, but for links to interior stylists, writers and assistants profiles, and a ton of inspiration. But for now, enjoy the show. Today's guest is a freelance journalist, presenter and producer of the indoor gardening podcast, On The Ledge. She has a 20-year background in news journalism and has worked for publications including The Guardian, The Financial Times, Gardens Illustrated, Grow Your Own Magazine and The English Garden. But today we aren't going to talk about her very green fingers. My guest is an expert on how freelancers can pitch feature ideas to editors. She knows how to wow editors with polished pitches and can clear up the question of who to email, what to say, and moreover, what to do when you don't get an answer. I'm very excited to welcome today's guest, Jane Perrone. Am I pronouncing your name right?
You are,
Good.
Yes.
Jane Perrone, who runs regular pitching for freelancers courses. Hello, Jane.
Hello.
Sorry,
I don't mind how you pronounce my name, but it is generally pronounced Perrone. But there's many different pronunciations out there.
Yeah, I listened to your podcast this morning to double check, and I still then questioned myself. So we connected because I got I did an Instagram post not long ago about what do people want me to talk about on the podcast. And I had a number of people come back to me and say, I want to know how to pitch. And I went into a Facebook group that we were both in and said, does anyone have any ideas and any tips? And you came back with these great ideas, and I discovered you had all this pitching course and you do so much stuff. So I thought it would be really great to get you on the podcast. So thank you for your time today.
My pleasure.
So maybe we could start by introducing you and maybe tell us a little bit about your background, because obviously you aren't from an interiors background, so people might not have come across you before.
Yeah, so I've been in journalism for a long time. I started off in local newspapers doing the very traditional National Council for the Training of Journalists course, which is a postgraduate course, and then worked in local papers for about 3 years until I was kind of in the right place at the right time and got my first job at The Guardian, which was, I don't know if you remember back then, this was in the year 2000, there was a thing called Guardian Unlimited, which was The Guardian's website, which is very separate from the paper. So I started off working for them and ended up working for The Guardian for 17 years. And the first half was on the web news side of things. And obviously during that time, the paper and the website, we finally convinced the print journalist that actually this web thing was maybe quite important. Mm-hmm. So that kind of eventually moved together. And then after I had my daughter, I was on maternity leave actually, and she had been born, and it was probably about 6 months into my maternity leave, and I was kind of burnt out from breaking news, because the period 2000 to 2007, if you recall, was quite busy news-wise, from September the 11th to the Iraq War to the London bombings. So I was kind of burnt out and I didn't want to go back to breaking news. So I saw the job of gardening editor on Weekend magazine at The Guardian come up, and it was a half-time job, and I thought, that's great. I'd just written a book about allotments for The Guardian and had always had a private personal passion for gardening, so that was a great fit for me. So I got that job, and then the second half of my time at The Guardian was as gardening editor, working mainly for Weekend magazine, although I did, in my kind of inevitable way, wanting to do more webby things, ended up doing a podcast with Alice Fowler about gardening and lots of blogging and things like that. So, but during that second half of my time at The Guardian, I also did some freelancing as my children got a bit older. I started to want to write for other publications. So that's where my experience of pitching really started. And then I left, it's probably 2.5 years ago now, to go completely freelance. And it's been a great experience. And I really enjoying the freelance life. And I've obviously now pitched to a lot of people. But I've got that experience as a desk editor of listening to people's pitches and reading those emails and your heart sinking, because they've just totally missed the mark from the first line. So that's why I decided to start running a Pitching for Freelancers course.
So it's kind of like when my husband had a really bad manager. At the time, it was an awful time, but we were saying this is learning how not to do it. And it's exactly like you're saying. If people are sending you really terrible pitches, you just want this outlet to be able to say, actually, you could improve this by doing this, that and the other. So is that kind of that really helped kind of work out how to do it? Because going from in-house to freelance is quite a big jump, and knowing how to pitch with like even seeing it coming in, did you kind of just do trial and error, or did you hit the ground running and knew how to make it work straight away?
Well, when I was pitching, when I was still working at The Guardian part-time as gardening editor, I think I was pretty rubbish, actually, in that I'd send out pitches and I wouldn't hear anything back, and I'd just be like, oh, well, they hate me and I'm not going to try again.
Yeah.
So, all those classic mistakes that you make, assuming that it's that you've made some terrible faux pas and that's why they haven't got back to you. So I wasn't very persistent at that stage, and I didn't really need to be, because that was only really a sort of a side hustle, that freelance work at the time. But I gradually did learn how to do it properly just through receiving so many terrible pitches at my end.
Can you give me an example of a terrible one then? What would make it so terrible?
Well,
you don't have to name
the
names. Worst
ones. Okay, here's a really terrible one. The email address the message is coming from is friskycow@yahoo.com, and the subject line is writing, and the first line is, "Dear Madam, yeah. I'd really like to write for The Guardian. I've got a great piece for The Guardian. I can't believe you haven't published me yet, and it's about 7 bamboos for small gardens. Tell me when you want to send it to you. Yeah. Bye." I mean, so there's a massive load of mistakes in there.
Yeah.
That we can go into more detail about, but just people the main thing people do wrong is not explaining who they are. And it sounds ridiculous when I say it, and I still can't believe it, but you would not be able to imagine the number of emails I'll get where somebody would just assume that I knew who they were.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting, because that wouldn't have entered my mind. I wouldn't assume someone would know who I was, but I wouldn't assume that they would want to know. I would think, they are looking for a feature. That's all they need to. They not so much they don't need to know anything about me. I would just say, "Hi, I'm Emma. I'm an interior stylist. I've got a great feature." You need to say more than that.
Yes, the reason why is because any editor, me included, you're very busy. And you don't have time to Google somebody and find out who they are, find their website. You need a little nugget of information that's going to explain who they are, because this isn't how most people come at it, but it comes across to the editor as you being presumptuous that, oh, well, I don't need to explain who I am because I am blah, and I'm amazing. So that's not the way that most people are thinking about it in their heads, but that's the way it comes across. And to be honest, I get so many emails and I'm so busy as a desk editor that if you don't explain yourself, delete, it's gone. Sorry, I don't have time. Unless your piece is some incredibly exclusive that I'm never going to be able to get anywhere else, then I might look you up and try to find out who you are. But other than that, I'm sorry, but I'm busy enough without making me do a load of work to find out who you are. Yeah. One of the key things that I say to people is you need to think, and this can get a bit deep, because you actually need to sit down and think, who am I? Well, how am I presenting myself? What aspects of what I do I need to present to the desk editor, and how do I summarise that concisely so that they can get a sense of me in a very short amount of time? So I help people with that side of things, because that's the starting point of a good pitch. Yeah,
that's so interesting, because that's not at all what I thought you were going to say. I didn't.
Oh, okay.
That didn't even enter my mind, which is exactly why I wanted you on, because this is such a different world for interiors coming to a pitching party sort of thing. I thought you were going to say, I get quite a lot of emails because I run Inside Stylist. I get quite a lot of people coming to me saying, I am this, I'm doing this, I want to do this, and I want to be an interior stylist, and I want to do that, and I'm thinking, I don't really care. No, I don't really care what you want, but I'm not interested in what you want. If you want something from me, I need to know what you want without it being me. And that's what I thought you were going to say with that kind of terrible pitch.
No, I mean, what I want to know is what qualifies you. I mean, I could get, there's 15 different people I can get to write that piece about bamboos for small gardens, right? What is it about you that makes you the ideal person to write this piece?
Yeah.
And if, you know, as I say, if it's a piece that I could get anybody to write, including one of my stable of established writers who are proven and known quantities to me, then you're going to have to be really on the money and have the right background for me to want you to write that piece. So I need to know who you are. And in these days where many of us have portfolio careers, you also need to think about what things you're going to tell the editor and what things you're not going to tell the editor. So, you know, you sometimes get people, you know, going, when they do tell you about themselves, they'll go off on a big random thing about, oh, and I've also got a sideline in making silk purses, and you think like, well, I don't really care about that.
Yeah, it's not relevant.
Or, you know, what I want to know about is the relevant experience you have. So in the case of an interior stylist, you know, you're pitching, I don't know, a mid-century modern look at X, Y, and Z. Well, yeah, I've shot, or I've designed these 3 projects for these 3 companies. So it's got to be things that I've heard of, things that I care about. So target the information you're giving to the editor very carefully, and don't feel like you've got to put in the kitchen sink. But at the same time, they need to be able to scan through and see, oh yes, you've worked for those companies that I like and respect. And you've got this kind of background. So those are the kind of things that are going to immediately make me read on. And if I don't get that in the first couple of lines, I'm probably not going to bother.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting stuff. I've learned so much. We've only been going 5 minutes. So I wanted to ask you what your easiest pitch is, but actually I think I should ask what people should do to get it right.
Yeah, so a lot of my course is about research. So the actual sending of the email is the very sort of tip of the iceberg, and the ending of quite a detailed process of figuring out who you're going to pitch to, and that extends to things like making sure that you're pitching to the right person, because a lot of the time you get pitches through and it's like, well, this would be nice if I actually commissioned this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And if I'm feeling in a generous mood, yes, I might forward it on to the right editor, but I probably won't, and most editors won't.
Yeah.
So making sure that you've done your research, that you understand the publication that you're pitching to and how they work, because there's nothing more annoying and insulting for an editor to receive a pitch which clearly indicates that the person pitching has not properly read or understood your publication and what they do.
Yeah.
And I would say that's 50% of the pitches I used to receive.
Yeah.
So, you know, like if you're pitching, say you're pitching to a magazine like Guardian Weekend, say you're interested in getting a house that you've styled in the homes pages. Well, have you looked at the homes pages recently? Have you looked at the kind of things that have been in the magazine recently? How many pages are devoted to that particular section? The style of things that are featured, the word length. You need to gather that kind of intelligence before you go ahead and pitch.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the things that you think they're probably quite straightforward and quite obvious to most people, but I can imagine people don't think of that. Like I was, just before we started recording, I said that in the past when I've got a real home that I want to get featured in a magazine, I just email the houses editor or whoever it is on the magazine, and then I would say, I've got this great house, it's in Greenwich and it's a townhouse, and here's the images. And it might be the right thing, but I might not be giving enough of the information. I'm just sending the images. But actually, the way you're describing it, there's so much more I can give them that will entice them into including this feature before they've even seen the pictures.
Yes, you've got to... They're going to be reading your email for a maximum of a minute. So yeah. You've got to, in that minute, make it really worthwhile. Pack in as much information that's going to make them go, yes, this is exactly the kind of content we run. This is exactly the kind of thing, the kind of style. Yes, I can get... These photos are the exactly right. I've been provided with all the information I need to make this an easy commission. Your whole aim should be to make the editor's life easy.
Yeah.
So that extends to things like, do not attach a million individual attachments, all of them 5 megs size, because again, if I get that and I can't look at the pictures in 2 seconds, bang, delete. Because I just don't have time. So if somebody hasn't provided a really cogent and easy to access package, then they're making their lives a lot more difficult than they would be otherwise. Because editors don't have time to fiddle around with settings and try to download things and they just want it to be easy. So from a picture point of view, it's really important to make sure that you're looking at how you can make that package very easily accessible, and that might be something like having a link to a light box that you can send them. I always used to love it when people would pitch gardens to me where it would just be a one single URL. Click on that URL, light box pops up with all the images that I can see nicely, easy, no hassle, don't have to download anything.
Yeah,
so make it easy
so that you can see all of them. You don't need to just see a selection.
Well, again, it depends where you're at with it. I mean, it depends whether you've had sometimes you might have already had something shot professionally, or you're working with a photographer, in which case, yes, you can send through the whole shoot. But again, if it's recce shots, that's fine. And you can say these are recce shots, provided that they're good enough to entice the editor in. Sending 5 good recce shots that are easy to access is better than sending a million pictures from a shoot that actually they're going to have to spend 10 minutes trying to figure out how to access. But again, make it clear what you're doing. If these are recce shots, you need to say these are recce shots, or this is a professional shoot by photographer X, and I'm working with them on this basis. Again, I don't want to have to figure things out. So if you send a load of shoot photos and you don't explain at the time, well, if you commission this piece, I am wedded to working with this photographer. So if you commission this piece, we're going to need to use these pictures and this photographer. We're working as a team. Whatever the deal, however you're working, you need to make it crystal clear to the editor, because there's nothing worse than an editor getting really excited about something and saying, yes, I'll commission it. But they may have a whole set of other things going on and think, well, actually, I love the house, but I don't particularly like these pictures, so I'm going to reshoot this with my own photographer.
Yeah.
And then come back to you, and then you're like, but no, because I've got to work with it. We've made an agreement, so it gets very messy very quickly. And the way you avoid that is by being crystal clear from the start as to what's going on.
Brilliant. Would you say, I was kind of going to say, are there any big no-nos or any must-dos? I think you've covered some of them, but have you got any kind of quick tips you can share that are just off the top of your head?
Make sure, I mean, as I said in my terrible example, make sure you have a professional email address. I know that sounds ridiculous, but if I see an email coming in from a frivolous email address, I do not take it seriously. I mean, again, if it's an incredible idea, I might be swayed, but I just think, who's this joker? Why are they not taking themselves seriously? I look at things like that because I'm from a web background. Likewise, make sure that if you can, and again, this is something I go into in the course in quite a lot of detail, understand the production cycle of the publication you're pitching to. So the number of times, especially at this time of year at The Guardian, we'd get pitches saying, oh, we've got these amazing items for your Christmas gift guide. And we're like, yeah, we finished the Christmas gift guide a month ago. You clearly don't understand or haven't inquired about how we work or what our production cycle is. So you've failed. You've wasted your time coming to us with this amazing thing that you've put together, because this is done and dusted for us. So you need to understand the production cycle. If it's a style website that's publishing daily, it may be that you can email on a Friday night and have something published on a Monday. But if it's a publication with really long lead times like Guardian Weekend or like the big glossies, then you need to know what they're working on right now in order to know what they're going to be commissioning next, so that your pitch slides in just at the right moment. And there are various ways of doing that, which I go into in the course, how to find out that information. But that's part of your research, and it is kind of tedious. And you think, oh, is this, But actually, if you just sit at your computer and tap out lots of emails, you're actually wasting an awful lot of time if you don't do that research first.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I do events with an interior designer, and we get interior stylists and interior designers together. And one of the biggest questions we get from the designers is, how do I get my project into a magazine? And I've always explained that it's not just a case of having a beautiful house. All magazines will want beautiful houses. They have to be in the right location with the right age owner for the magazine. It has to have the right look. They don't want 6 kitchens that are all white. They want them all different. And there's so many different elements involved in what a magazine will be looking for at any one time. But yeah, you're right. The more information you have, the more successful your pitching will be.
Yeah, exactly. And that will change over time in terms of, there are certain times of year that are, more busy than others for certain magazines. It's all, you need to bear all of that in mind when you're putting that pitch in, because there's nothing more depressing than sending off this email and you think it's incredible and then you get nothing, literally nothing back.
Yeah.
And that's a real kick in the teeth when you spend a lot of time working on something.
Absolutely.
But again, there are ways of dealing with that.
How do you deal with pitch rejection? Or it's almost ghosting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, no reply. I mean, I think I've been patting myself on the back here, but I think when I was editing the Gardens pages of Weekend, I was pretty good at replying to people's emails. But a lot of desk editors assume that if you don't hear from them, that they won't reply unless they're interested. So a no reply is a no. However, the other thing to say is you really have to have a bit of a confidence boost for yourself and say, just because I haven't heard back does not mean they hate my idea. They probably haven't read my email yet. So there is a very good argument for following up emails, and even, dare I say it, using the telephone, which is tremendously kind of old-fashioned, but sometimes it can really work. It can really work. But again, you've got to get your timing right, and you've got to make sure you're going to speak to the right person. And but the main thing is, I'd say, is just have confidence in yourself and your ideas. If you've done the research, then if you don't hear back, feel free to send a follow-up. And the question that is slightly more difficult is, how many times do you follow up before you declare something a lost cause?
Yeah. That's really interesting, because I would assume you'd follow up once and then that would be it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes there are people who are just incredibly persistent and they do get published in the end just because they're really persistent. And in the end, it's almost like, I don't know, playing darts. Eventually something hits the board
Or they
if they keep trying.
Yeah, now
and you
they
develop
are looking for that feature.
even if it's not necessarily, you just don't want to make yourself into a nuisance. That's the only thing. And be that sort of freelancer that everyone goes, oh no, it's so and so, which does happen.
I'm sure it happens quite a lot.
But yeah, and I mean, the other thing I would say, and again happens surprisingly frequently, is never say anything negative about the publication. Again, you might not be able to believe this, but never say anything negative about the publication that you are pitching to. So even down to, as I said, gave my example, don't say, it's a real shame that you haven't published anything about sustainable rugs in your last 10 issues. I can't believe you haven't covered this really important issue. Because, again, that the editor takes that as, you might think that you're showing that you've got your finger on the pulse of interior design, but actually you're basically just slagging off the publication and saying, you idiots, why haven't you done this? Which is not what an editor wants to hear. No. They want their ego stroking.
Yeah.
So say nice things, show that you understand the publication, compliment them on a piece that you read recently that you thought was good. I mean, it sounds really cheesy, but actually, if you can just show that you understand the publication, it means an awful lot to an editor.
Yeah. Is it different pitching between a magazine? Like, if you were going to pitch to a magazine, do you do it differently to how you do it to a newspaper?
Yes, again, that's largely to do with what I was talking about in terms of research and timing and just content, in that, do you understand the news cycle that would be at play for a newspaper as opposed to a monthly magazine, and in terms of the kind of content they commission. Do you understand the terminology? I mean, again, silly things like when you're pitching to a magazine, okay, for example, that most of their interiors features are 2 spreads and a single, or a single, or 2 spreads, or like even things like that. If you can show that you kind of understand what they're up to and how they do things, then they'll be much more convinced that you could do the job.
Yeah.
And newspapers, it tends to be a lot more frenetic, and they tend to commission things much more last minute, whereas magazines, it can be literally months and months and months in advance.
Yeah.
So if you're going for something seasonal, then you need to bear that in mind.
Yeah, the amount of times we've shot Christmas, like literally in January for the following Christmas issue.
It's ridiculous. And that also has a knock-on effect if publications are paying on publication.
Yes,
because
I was thinking that.
Then
you don't get paid for a year.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why you've got to really be very organised in your pitching and make sure that you're keeping going with pitching, so that stuff that you get a commission, you think, yay, great, and then you start working on that, but actually you should be sending off your pitches for the following month's work, so that you've got an ongoing stream coming in, which is, it's really hard.
Yeah, I was going to say you have to be ultra organised.
Yeah.
Ultra organised. Just wondering, does social media come into pitching at all? Do you connect with people and then pitch to them, having spoken to them, like message privately on Instagram and things like that? Is that a thing?
It can be a thing. I mean, personally, I would be a bit annoyed if somebody. Well, I don't know. I don't quite. My knowledge of the interiors world is not as good as the gardens world. But if somebody tried to pitch to me through an Instagram DM, I would be very nice, but I would say email me, because in this day and age, when you've got so many different streams of information coming in, as an editor, to then remember that person has sent you that DM and then transfer that information to your kind of work mindset is not necessarily an easy thing. So I think you have to just play it by ear and sort of try to read the nuances of somebody's social media presence and see how they work.
Yeah. But I was thinking more in terms of things like when you connect with people, you're more likely to work with them. So
definitely. Yes, chat, I would definitely be that. Work. Exactly. Yes. So if you want to, if you want to pitch to a particular editor or something, and you follow them on every social media platform, because that will give you intelligence as to how they're working, what they're interested in, and will help you to hone your pitch. So get behind them on every single platform they're on, understand how they're working, and that will help you. But I would make any formal pitches, I would make through kind of boring email channels.
I was thinking more professional, less personal, and less social.
But it may be that you DM them. They put up an amazing Instagram story about something that you are passionate about, and send them a DM saying, "I thought this was amazing. I really love the blah blah blah." And then what that means is when your email comes in, they go, "Oh yeah, this person is already on my radar vaguely." So you kind of make yourself. That's what another thing is really, that if you're vaguely on somebody's periphery of somebody's network, then oftentimes that will make them stop and read the email rather than deleting if they already kind of know who you are. So again,
it's that whole network.
Yeah, get involved in those kind of networks where people who are likely to commission you hang out, and make yourself a useful person. Like, engage in people's discussions, answer questions for people, help people out, and then that way you kind of show that you're a good kind of a person who's involved and helpful, and rather than just kind of an annoying presence, which is sometimes makes people go, oh, say if you're an irritating social media presence, that's not good.
No.
I'm not speaking of anyone in particular here, but I have had that thing where you just think, oh gosh, this person just keeps sending me a DM with a kind of a question that I can't really answer. and I've asked them to do this and they haven't done it. Well, they haven't emailed me, they've sent me another DM. So again, try to make yourself just a useful person, and then you'll already be on their radar. And likewise, if you go to networking events or particular events in your industry, feel free to go up to somebody that you want to send a pitch to and have a chat with them, without becoming too I'm now going to pitch you this piece. But then when you do pitch them, send them an email, you can say, oh, you may recall we met at X event and we chatted about how mutual acquaintance A and mutual acquaintance B, blah, blah, blah. So you bring in reference points so they kind of go, oh, yeah, I remember that person. And, oh, yeah, they've worked with so-and-so and they thought they were really good. So I'm going to actually read this email and take them seriously.
Yeah. This has been fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. It's touched on some things I thought you would say, but you've opened up a whole new world of how to approach editors and things. Thank you very much. Can you share with the audience a little bit more about your Pitching for Freelancers course? How do you run it? Is it like is it something you can sign up to immediately, or do you run it at certain times? It's
very simple, actually. I try to make it as simple as possible because, I don't like things that make you jump through loads of hoops. So there's basically 2 levels to it. There's a basic level, which is you sign up and I send you the whole course, which is basically 4 lessons as a PDF, and you get signed up to the Facebook group that goes with the course. So you can work through the PDF at your own pace. There are exercises to do and there are pieces of homework to do, and you can ask questions in the Facebook group. So that way you get a really good insight into all the information, but you don't get any one-to-one time with me. If you go for the plus level, you get that, but what I do is then I will send through the course in 4 instalments at intervals of your choosing. So if you kind of feel like you're the kind of person that needs not just to have something put in front of you, but to have a nudge to say, okay, and here's lesson 1. And so I look at everyone's, you can submit your homework exercises to me, which I'll feed back on. And at the end of the course, you get a half-hour call with me to discuss where you're at, what your next steps are, and so on. And I mean, that's quite a valuable thing, because then I can give really one-to-one tailored information to people. So I would, that's I've had a lot of people say that has been really valuable, but obviously it costs more because there's more of my time involved. But lots of people have said they've paid off the cost of the course very, very quickly in terms of knowing that they should be pitching at a slightly higher fee. And we talk about fee negotiations, what to do if you don't get a response, what to do if you do get a response, and the questions to ask. So there's lots in there. There's lots of stuff in there to chew on, and and it's amazing when people come out the other end. They're just amazed that the amount of information that they've got wrong and how much they've learned. Yeah, particularly because oftentimes people doing the course they're not journalists by training. They're people who've got a specialism and they've got an amazing amount of knowledge that they can impart, and they're good writers, but they just don't know the ins and outs of that process of getting something published. So that's where the course comes in.
Yeah, no, I've looked at the course outline. It's if anyone wants to go and have a little look, it's on Jane's website, which is janeperrone.com. I will link through in the show notes if you want to have a direct link through there. But it's I wanted to do it before. Now I doubly want to do it, having spoken to you. It's like, I think you've just given us the tip of the iceberg. There's talking about the money side.
There's loads in there, and I think that's what gets me excited about it, is seeing people have these sudden revelations where they're like, oh, I need to say who I am.
Exactly.
And it's great because you suddenly realise that. And when I was doing the course, a lot of the things I was writing down, thinking, oh, you know what? This is so obvious. Do I really need to say this? And time again, it's been proven. It's not because anyone's stupid. It's just because the things that I am are so innate in me are not necessarily some things that other people have picked up on, who are new to this kind of world of pitching. So exactly. It's fun to see the penny drop.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Well, thank you. Last question. What are you working on? Or what are you pitching at the moment? Or you might have to keep it a secret.
Well, I am in the very lucky situation that I don't really have to pitch an awful lot these days.
Of course not.
I have a reasonably good flow of work coming in. I mean, I do. That said, I do pitch, and the great thing is once you've got an established relationship with an editor and you've filed a piece and they like it, it becomes instantly a million times easier because you're a known quantity. So I tend to work with the same publications over and over again just because I like the editor and they pay the right amount, etc., etc., etc. So I write a lot for the Financial Times and the Guardian still, and as other pieces come up, even what you also find, this is the golden moment where you find that editors get in touch with you saying, "Can you write this for me?" Which is a nice moment.
Yeah.
So what I also love doing, which I get to do a lot, is something will happen and I'll think, "Oh, I'd love to do that," so I'm going to pitch an idea. So in the summer, I found out that somebody near me was opening a hedgehog rescue, and I thought, I really want to go and cuddle baby hedgehogs. Yes. So I pitched a piece to the Financial Times about looking after hedgehogs in your garden, and they were like, "Yeah, we love it." So I got to go and cuddle baby hedgehogs. So that's the great side of my job.
Brilliant.
In that, I mean, and that's another thing to say is, anything can be fodder for a pitch.
Yeah.
So I get to do that kind of thing, and but at the minute I'm standing in for the FT's regular gardening columnist in the next at the end of this month. So I've got to get those columns written. So I'm not doing an awful lot of pitching at the moment, but it's always there in the background, and there's always ideas brewing. So and there is, and I still have scary moments where I pitch to somebody I haven't pitched to before, and you realise that everyone has different cycles. Sometimes you'll get an email back straight away. Sometimes it's 6 months later and they suddenly, out of the blue, drop you an email to say, "Oh yes, about those ideas." So yeah, it's fun. It's always different. And the other thing you learn is that all editors are different, and you can't deal with everyone in the same way and expect the same results. So that's something else you can throw into the mix.
One email and throw it out to everybody.
Well, that's another good. That's something we get into in the course. Is can you kind of double or triple pitch things? But that is
wow.
Yeah,
I think you've definitely made everyone want to go and sign up.
Well, as I say, I'm more than happy to have people come along and take a look at the course. The other thing to say is it has a kind of a guarantee on it. So if you're not happy at all with the course, then you get your money back, no questions asked. So it's kind of hopefully it's a no-brainer, and that if the course isn't for you, then you get your money back. So
amazing. Well, Jane, thank you so much for your time. It's been fascinating. I'm rethinking everything in my head now, and I'm sure all the listeners are too. I think this is going to be such a popular episode. Thank you so much. Really.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Inside Stylist podcast. You can find all the details from today's episode over in the show notes on insidestylist.com. If you enjoyed the show, I'd love it if you would head on over to iTunes and rate and review it. It's the best way to help other people find the show, and I'd really appreciate it. Until next time, bye for now.